And marijuana is not a gateway drug. On Saturday, former Vice President Joe Biden did a town hall event in Las Vegas where he showed just how out of touch with modern times he truly is. Joe Biden told that crowd that no, he does not support the national effort by some candidates to decriminalize marijuana because we don't know if marijuana is a gateway drug or not. Joe Biden did not say that marijuana is a gateway drug. He just said, we don't know if it's a gateway drug, which is probably not quite as bad as saying that it is, but still just as stupid. The available scientific research on the subject shows that no, marijuana is in fact not a gateway drug. Marijuana users are no more likely than non-marijuana users to try hard drugs. There is no correlation between using marijuana and moving on to higher drugs. That is what all of the studies have told us. Hell, that's what the CDC itself tells us. The Center for Disease Control, part of the federal government, says, yeah, it's not a gateway drug. And yet Joe Biden's up on that stage in Las Vegas saying, we don't know. We have the scientific studies. We have the research. There is no correlation between using marijuana and abusing other drugs. It simply doesn't exist. You know the science is out there. You know the research is out there. You know these scientific papers exist proving you wrong. But you can't take the stance of being wrong, so you cloud the debate.
My name is Rebecca. I started using opiates at the age of 14. I was an athlete. I danced and cheered, and I was tumbling at cheerleading practice, and I blew my ankle out, and I got prescribed pain pills by my doctor.
Rebecca's story is like so many others. You see it begin right at childhood.
Her addiction really started very innocently. She was a very accomplished dancer as an adolescent and had an ankle injury at the age of 14. Her medical treatment escalated to the use of very, very powerful opioid medications very early on.
There was no caution, no red flag at all. It was take these or feel better, and that was it. And then 2 months later, I had a habit already, like just from the pain pills. So that's when the heroin started.
As you heard the doctor say, there is very little bona fide research on whether cannabis helps with the opioid addiction.
It's partly because marijuana is still illegal under federal law, so federal grants won't pay for the studies.
Our data show that people who are abusing or dependent on prescription opioids are 40 times more likely to be abusing or dependent on heroin. There's been speculation that the decrease in inappropriate opioid prescribing is driving people to abuse drugs such as heroin more.
So there's been a lot of attention in the media recently around the issue of cannabis and the opioid epidemic. And as some of you may know, we are in the midst of an opioid epidemic, the worst in our nation's history. In fact, there's over 2 million Americans who have an opioid use disorder. And in 2016, over 40,000 Americans died of an opioid overdose. And that's more deaths than there were from breast cancer. And over the last year and a half, more Americans have died from opioid overdoses than were killed in the entire Vietnam War. And around the clock, an American dies of an opioid overdose every 12 minutes. And a recent estimate pinned the cost of the opioid epidemic having totaled already $1 trillion.
In your Health Watch tonight, doctors in Colorado can now prescribe medical marijuana in cases where an opioid is the go-to option. It's the third state to make that legal. It's already legal in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Colorado's new law is different, though, because it lets doctors prescribe marijuana to post-op patients who are in pain. Researchers are still studying just how effective it is.
Pretty shocking statistic. Every day, 130 Americans on average die from an opioid overdose. That's according to the CDC.
Now, to fight that disturbing trend, an innovative San Francisco program is turning to another drug.
Marijuana.
After breaking his neck in a car accident out of state, Nicholas Olson says he got addicted to prescription drugs and heroin.
I tried outpatient treatment. I've been to other inpatient programs. I just never got anywhere with any of it.
His research online led him to a unique substance abuse treatment program, Remedy Recovery, in San Francisco's south of Market.
I thought, wow, this is great that this is an option now.
It replaces cannabis for opioids.
It's a game changer.
Joe Schrank, the clinical social worker who founded Remedy Recovery, says cannabis offers a more compassionate way to detox.
People being able to sleep while they're in withdrawal and detox is a huge, huge, huge benefit. It's the best thing for people who are detoxing, and cannabis lets that happen safely.
Nicholas uses a vape pen 2 to 3 times a day under the guidance of his doctors and therapists, and takes care not to drive under the influence. He says cannabis frees him from debilitating neck pain, anxiety, and insomnia. Schrank adds, cannabis is safer than opioids with far less potential for a deadly overdose.
There are examples of people who have had accidents while under the influence of cannabis, but the misuse potential is extraordinarily low.
In fact, the Journal of the American Medical Association reports in states that legalize medical and recreational pot, opioid use is down 7%, and fatal opioid overdoses have dropped nearly 25%. As for Nicholas, he knows cannabis isn't a cure for his opioid addiction, but he believes it's a good start toward a more hopeful future.
There is substantial evidence that the cannabinoids from cannabis are effective for chronic pain. Moreover, cannabinoids and opioids have synergistic properties, and when combined, you can significantly lower the amount of opioids needed to achieve the same level of pain relief. So if you can lower the amount of opioids needed, that's less potential for an overdose, as well as less potential for dependence. Moreover, medical cannabis states have lower rates of opioid overdoses than states that don't have medical cannabis laws. And lastly, cannabinoids have been shown to reduce neuroinflammation. And in both chronic pain as well as long-term opioid use, we see higher levels of neuroinflammation, which we think are worsening the pain sensation as well as leading to potentially more opioid dependence. So the ability of cannabinoids to lower neuroinflammation is another way that it could potentially be beneficial to chronic pain patients who've been on long-term opioids.
Lori Lavender recently moved to Knoxville from New York, where medical marijuana is legal.
I was a nurse for 21 years. I injured myself when I first became a nurse.
She suffered from a debilitating injury and says she's had anxiety since she was a little girl.
Tried everything, therapy and injections. They didn't work. I ended up on opioids and became dependent on that.
With nowhere else to turn, Lori decided to try medical marijuana.
My thoughts on it were I'd give it a try because I had nothing to lose.
She wasn't sure what to expect at first and wasn't just uneasy about smoking it.
I was nervous about the stigma.
But after a few years, her daily dose of dozens of pills dropped to 0.
I was able to stop all the opioids, any antidepressants or anxiety meds that I was on, and I think it just basically saved my life. So if that's not enough, I don't know what is.
David Ballou runs a pharmacy and says research shows that it can help in certain cases.
There's no doubt that there are conditions where marijuana or Cannabidiols in marijuana, specific compounds, have been shown to be beneficial in certain conditions.
If the latest amendment would have passed in Tennessee, these are the conditions that would have gotten you a medical marijuana registration card. But some Tennessee lawmakers say there's not enough research on marijuana to legalize it. Governor Bill Lee has been quoted saying that I think we should expand the use of low THC CBD oils first to alternative treatments before we go there.
But there are significant challenges that lie ahead if we want to conduct this study. For the last 50 years, cannabis has been classified by the US federal government as a Schedule I drug. Schedule I drugs are defined as having the highest potential for abuse out of all drugs and having no medical use. And other Schedule I drugs include drugs like heroin and LSD. Schedule I drugs are the most difficult drugs to do research on in America. And moreover, funding is very difficult as well. So the US federal government provides over $200 million a year in research funding for cannabis. However, almost all of this funding goes towards studying the harm and abuse potential of cannabis, and very little goes towards studying the therapeutic potential. So if we want this study to see the light of day, philanthropy is going to be a vital resource.
More than half the states in the union have already legalized marijuana in some form or other. They've medicinalized it. They've legalized it for recreational use. We should end the federal prohibition on marijuana. We can